I'm going to break down everything we know so far about shipbuilding in Starfield for you, as there has been quite a lot of exciting and interesting information released since that Starfield Direct presentation back in June. So by the end of this video, you'll be fully up to speed on this awesome in-game mechanic. And let's start with the fundamentals first. How does this mechanic actually work in-game, and when will you be able to take full advantage of everything that it has to offer? Well, according to Todd Howard, the game director, in a recent podcast interview with Kinda Funny Games, we can expect a deep and complex shipbuilding system in Starfield that really only comes alive during the late game. So you shouldn't expect to start the game immediately being able to customize every aspect of the ship, as it's a very long, complicated and costly process. Now this makes sense, as there is 23 confirmed customization options for our ship, which I'll go through in detail for you shortly. So having all of these 23 options available to tinker with at the start of the game could be a little bit overwhelming. That's especially so if you go on to buy, steal or build the 9 available ships you're able to have in Starfield. That means that there's a maximum of 207 customizable options that require your attention when you do have a full space fleet. But how do you actually get yourself your first ship in this game? Well, after progressing through the initial storyline, we will then be issued with our Constellation exploration ship called Frontier, which is when we'll then be able to alter it and upgrade it by interacting with a ship technician at every spaceport on several city planets. These technicians will allow us to buy and sell ship components, pay for repairs, and give us some useful tips and hints on where to hire additional crew in the settled systems. That said, you can always steal ships after initiating the pirating boarding feature in game, and after you do acquire the ship you want, you'll then have a couple options available to you. The first being that you can, of course, fly it around and use it for your own future piracy missions, but if you do want to upgrade or sell that ship itself, you'll need to register it at a spaceport so it becomes a legal space vessel, which means spending a lot of in-game credits to do so, with Todd stating that the purpose of this mechanic being to stop the in-game economy from spiraling out of control. As in theory, you could end up having a fleet of 9 superb spaceships early on in the game, which you could then sell for a ridiculous profit. Now, let's say you do go on to register your new ship, or perhaps you want to start from scratch and create your own, then the Starfield team have stated that we space captains then need to think about balancing our ship's strengths and weaknesses depending upon how we want to play with that specific ship. So for example, let's say that we want a super fast ship just like the Millennium Falcon, so we can outrun the authorities while we're doing a smuggling run. So what we'll need to do back at the spaceport is we'll need to prioritize the ship's speed and jump distance over expensive armor upgrades, which of course means we're going to be faster but more susceptible to cannon fire and damage against enemies, whereas perhaps you'll want to focus on trade more in your Starfield journey, so you'll want to increase your cargo hold and armor at the expense of fast engines so you can carry more goods that results in a substantial profit. But you'll be very slow in the process and also susceptible to pirates in that regard. And this is just one example, but just highlights the flexibility and deep shipbuilding system that will be offered to us in this game, which I think is a great transition onto these modules and components that we'll be able to tinker with when it comes to shipbuilding. And I think it's best that we start with the cockpit, which is where we'll be piloting our spaceship. And if I just pause here and zoom in on this shipbuilding menu, you can see that this Phobos cockpit adds an additional 50 cargo space, 5 health, and an increase in 6 crew slots, which is quite significant in size. In fact, let's zoom further down on the screen where we can see that it will cost us 13,000 credits, with the mass or weight being +5, and I'll explain all these unique stats and how they affect your ship shortly. But it's important to note that each module here will bring its own unique statistical advantages and disadvantages that can be viewed here in this panel. Now let's move on to the habitat module, otherwise known as the HAB, which will increase our crew space further, meaning we can hire more crew and put them to work depending upon their specific skills. So for example, Sarah Morgan has a high astrodynamic skill, which increases the capability of the gravity drive, which means that we can space jump further around the galaxy. So having her work in the HAB module or cockpit will allow her to benefit us and our ship in that way according to her skill. Now, connected to the HAB are the engines, which we can increase the speed and acceleration of the ship, where you'll need to take into consideration the total mass or weight of the ship. Meaning, if you've got a heavy big boy ship, you're going to need some big boy engines to get it up in the air. So if you see the red mass text highlighted in this menu, as you can see here, it means that you need more engine power to counter the ship's weight to make it functional. Now, as for the fuel tanks, these run on helium-3 and power the gravity drive, meaning the bigger the fuel tanks, the further and more frequent gravity jumping will be available for our ship in between refueling at outposts or spaceports. And whilst we're on the topic of this grav drive, it's formerly known as the Graviton Loop Array, which allows us to make faster than light jumps from one star system to another and will be instrumental in the whole Starfield game. And if we just zoom in again here on the menu, we can see an option called Grav Jump Thrust, which is the distance given in light years that it can jump to, which in this case is 16. So when we pull up our space map in our cockpit, we will be able to jump or fast travel to systems in the game within 16 light years, depending upon if we have enough helium-3 fuel stored in our tanks. Now, when activating this grav jumping game, you'll notice a countdown timer here, and this countdown timer can be reduced if more power is allocated to the grav drive directly, which we'll also go through alongside ship stats in a moment, because if your ship gets damaged during this jump sequence, it can knock us out of our grav drive, meaning we'll have to try and escape by other means or fight the aggressors directly. Now, another expensive component on the ship is this reactor, which powers everything else in the ship that the fuel tanks don't. And even though it hasn't yet been confirmed officially at the time of recording, I've got a feeling the system will be responsible for how many modules you can add to your ship. So in this case, the reactor can only power a maximum of 14 until it's upgraded. Now, as for the offensive components on our ship, we have weapons to choose from that will affect the enemy ships differently. So if we utilize energy weapons like lasers here, they will reduce the enemy's defensive shields, whereas ballistic cannons and missiles will reduce the hull or overall health of the opposing ship. We've also got the electromagnetic weapons, such as the electron beam, as you can see here, which will go on to disrupt the enemy's electrical systems like their auto lock and ship tracking. Now, as for landing gear and the docking modules, all ships come equipped with the auto-deploying landing gear, which can be upgraded to land on all types of terrain on various planets, which means you won't be able to land on planets until you get the specific upgrades for your landing gear. But when it does come to boarding the enemy vessels, we'll be able to dock with them and pass through the airlock to take control of the cockpit, which I can't wait to do 1,000 times over. It's like a space pirate game. I can't wait to play it. Now, if you are enjoying the video so far, please do leave a very swift like down below. So thanks very much for your support. And good news, I'm running a Starfield game giveaway. You just need to be a subscriber of the channel to enter, and I'll pop the link in the pinned comment. So best of luck to you. Now, there's a lot of different stats and detailed options you need to be aware of when it comes to tinkering with your spaceship at a spaceport, and let's run through what each one means together right now. Firstly, we've got LAS, which means lasers, BAL, which means ballistics, and MSL, which means missile damage strength, with each number corresponding to its current rate of performance. And if you do decide to upgrade them, then of course the number will increase in accordance with its output. Now, moving on to the hull, this is the main body of our ship and essentially our overall health bar when in combat. It protects the crew, cargo, scientific machinery, and upgrading this module is going to give you a little bit more insurance when in space dogfights. Next, we've got the shield section, which stands for shield generators, which I'm sure you've seen across several sci-fi films over the last several decades, where there's a force field wrapped around the ship to initially protect everyone from incoming offensive fire. These end up recharging and refreshing when out of combat, and if you upgrade them, you'll have a greater shield cushion in space battles with a faster recharge, which is good stuff. Now, moving on to cargo, this represents your infantry space and how much stuff you can essentially carry in space, which of course will equate to an increase in weight and mass and may cost us more fuel when traveling around space. I also want to bring your attention to the shield cargo capacity option here in the menus, which is where I believe we can hide our contraband or illegal goods on our ship to avoid the scans of embargo blocks placed on certain city planets like New Atlantis, as you can see here in action actually from that Starfield direct presentation. Next up is the amount of crew members we can have on board. That number will of course again increase as we upgrade the cockpit and habitation modules, with the jump range option referring to the capability that our current ship is capable of traveling in the settled system. So what we discussed earlier in terms of light year distance. And as for mobility, this is maneuverability when flying through space. So the higher the mobility score, the more agile your ship will feel in dogfights. And if you played any kind of space or flying games, it's just going to respond a lot quicker and nicer for you. And if we combine that with the top speed stat here, which does what it says on the tin, really, that's as fast as your ship can go. You're going to have to play around with both of these two stats in particular to get a feel of what the right balance is for you when flying your spaceship through space. And finally, mass, which is what we also touched upon earlier, with each component and cargo having a weight total. And this will subsequently affect your speed, mobility, gravity drive, engines, and reactor power. So a very, very important metric to keep an eye on. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you're flying a tractor through space. Now let's move up to the top left-hand corner of the shipbuilding menu here, because you will also see another selection of stats called the power allocation system. And let's breeze through them now, because we've got lasers, ballistic weapons, and missile damage strength, with engine, shields, and gravity drive options to the right. Now, below these selections, you'll see a number. In this case, it's 14, which represents the power cores available from your reactor, which you can then distribute in real time while flying your spaceship to each one of these options. So if you want to make your ship faster, we'll increase our engine allocation, as you can see here, by utilizing the D-pad buttons on the Xbox controller. Or if we want to make a gravity jump very quickly, we then allocate our power allocation cores to the gravity drive to do so. And of course, if you're about to head into a dogfight, allocating those power cores to shields and your weapons will give you an advantage offensively. So lots of complexity, but quite simple to understand once you get to know what you're dealing with. But that said, there's also a few customization options we'll be able to do to make each ship unique to what we want. And that starts with the color, with each module and component available for a paint job, allowing us to mess around with the hue, saturation, and brightness panels to get the exact color we want, as well as a recent tab below it, which is a great quality of life addition, because when you're going through all 23 modular options for your ship, it would be super annoying to have to scroll through each color bar to replicate your desired color. So good to see that option implemented here. Additionally, we also have the choice of adding cowls or cowling for our ship, which is essentially basic decoration to make your ship look a specific way, with the official description being that it modifies the ship's shape, size, personality, and silhouette, with the trade-off being that it only adds a little bit of total mass or weight to the ship. And I imagine there's going to be a lot more cosmetic cowling made thanks to the awesome modding community, and I can't wait to see it. Now, customization and ship tweaking aside, Bethesda have gone even further with the detail surrounding shipbuilding, and that's regarding the shipbuilding companies and manufacturers that are actually engineering and creating these components for in-game purchases. In fact, you can see these companies with their logos on the menu systems when you're flicking through your blueprint screen, where I counted 11 being shown so far. Now, we don't yet know what the difference between company is, or if there will be any stat bonuses or benefit when using various different components on your ship which are built by the same company, but it's quite clear that several different modules that are made by the same business follow their own unique style or manufacturing ethos when it comes to ship engineering and their cosmetic look. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if each company offers us missions or contracts which we can then complete, and as a reward we will get a significant weapon upgrade from one of these private companies that specializes in space weaponry. So perhaps if you want to build a very overpowered offensive orientated spaceship, you'd want to then focus on finishing the quest line for the weapon-centric manufacturer for some of the best offensive cannons in the galaxy, and maybe even some nukes, which would be very interesting to say the least. Now, if you're excited for Starfield, just as I am, then you want to check out this other video, which I've popped up on your screen right now, for even more Starfield breakdowns just like this one. And do consider subscribing if you haven't already, as I'll be covering Starfield from start to finish, including guides, tips and tricks, news, and updates. And it would be awesome to have you along for the ride. Big thanks to Nika, my co-content creator, for making this video with me. It's not possible without her. Cheers for stopping by, and coffee is on me.